What's up, everybody? We're on YouTube now. Finally, our stream is now live. Thank you, everybody, for waiting. We're about 10 minutes late, but hopefully we're going to make that up during the call. For everybody who's joining in, I want to see a quick hand, a quick emoji in the chat. Good evening, everybody. How are you guys doing? Sorry, I'm just a little frazzled because literally we have this problem with every single live stream. There's always some issue. We're just about to start now. We have a lot of people watching on YouTube. Great to look. So we're going to get started now within the next 30 seconds. So let me just open up my docs. Let me talk a little bit about, in the meantime, what the overall structure of this live is going to be. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because I received a lot of messages from folks asking about how things are about to change with COVID-19, this is something that was totally unexpected. Nobody had a clue this was coming, but here we are, and we're going to figure out how to deal with it. In this episode, we're going to talk about a few things related to that. We're going to have Q&A towards the very end. In between, I'm just going to go through some stuff that I have prepared. Mayank, I'm going to make you the host of this meeting. Just keep an eye on everything and just make sure people are muted throughout the conversation. Towards the end, we'll just open it up to everybody who is on the Discord. Hello. Cool. So we're just about to start now. Let's jump into this. So hopefully you guys have had some time to think about what this topic is. Hopefully a lot of you are prepared with super exciting questions, super difficult questions, I hope, to ask. We are now going to get into talk about roughly talk about this topic, which is how the design industry is about to change after lockdown. Let me just make sure. Okay, we're all good. A quick show of hands in the chat. Can you all see this? Can you all see my slides? Because we're just about to start. Okay, so a lot of you might be joining for the first time. Welcome. My name is Abhinav. I run this channel. I'm the founder of 10K Designers. That's 10kdesigners.com. A little bit about me for those of you who don't really know. 10K Designers is something that I started about a year and a half ago, maybe 18 months ago. It was primarily a YouTube channel when it started. It was a place to share learnings. Today, 10K Designers is a design and product education company. we're working towards how do we enable the next generation of self-taught designers. I'm going to talk about that later in the future. Before this, I was the head of design at Unacademy. A lot of you might be familiar with this. Unacademy is today one of the biggest live learning platforms in the world. I joined Unacademy as an early employee. I was responsible for setting up the entire design team. One of the main projects that we worked on was Unacademy Plus, which is today one of the biggest live learning platforms in the world. Besides that, I've also written a book called Pyjama Profit. This is a book that I wrote with my co-author and college classmate Varun. This is a book about freelancing. Besides that, I've been a startup founder before. I worked on the music app called Listen. Did that for 1.5 years before we shut that down. I've also worked with a lot of freelance as well as full-time startups. My freelance projects have been with clients across India, US, Europe. I've also worked with some startups like housing.com earlier. So the overview of this call, we're going to be talking about the availability of jobs, which is today with these uncertain times. Are there more jobs? Are companies scared to hire? Is it roughly the same? We're going to be talking about how one thing that COVID has accelerated, which was bound to happen, is the death of 4-year programs. We're going to be talking about why that is. We're going to be talking about remote work. Now, remote work has gone from something that was fringe, you had a few people doing it, to now it's the default. We're going to be talking about building a competitive advantage with the internet, which is how do you build now this time that you have. A lot of you have free time, either it's from college or it's from the extra hours you have now that you're working at home. We're going to be talking about how you can build a competitive advantage with the internet. Other than that, we're going to have a beta announcement. We're going to talk about the 10K designers community, which we're opening out of beta. So in this call towards the end, you're going to see a little bit of that. We have a lot of people on this call live right now from Discord as well. We're going to be doing a little bit Q&A, and I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that. And then we're going to have direct Q&A and open it up to discussion. So are you all ready to get started? Shall we just get into this? Despite all the trouble we had starting, we're now in the stream. I want to see some enthusiastic fire emojis in the chat. And we're about to get into this. All right, let's go. So let's talk about availability of jobs. Now, typically, you've seen that companies are a little panicked, which is this was a situation that sort of came out of the blue. A lot of companies sort of froze their hiring, which is very expected because when things are in flux, when things are changing, typically a defensive move is to stop hiring, which is you want to make sure that you are covering your company's base. Like you don't want to take rash decisions. So companies today, now it's been a few months. It's been about maybe 3 months since we've been in this. Companies today have realized that this is not a temporary thing that's happened. This is something that is very likely to stay for a while. We don't know when exactly this is going to end. So what companies have started doing is initially they were defensive, which was, let's protect what we have so that we can make sure we survive this. But now companies are actually on the offensive, which is they are figuring out how can we make the best of the situation? How do we create processes around remote work? And hiring at some level has resumed. But it's still not the same across industries, which is, let me talk about which companies are the most affected by this and which ones are not so much. So one way to look at this is let's talk about the type of company. So there's startups, there's agencies, design agencies, and then there's bigger companies. Now, typically, let's talk about the mindset of each of these types of companies. So for a startup, there are some startups that are actually doing really, really well now. There are startups that are doing their best month yet. And can anybody guess why that is? Can you guess in the chat, why are some startups actually thriving right now? Why are they doing so well? Agencies. Now, agencies typically, I'll talk about that in just a sec, about why startups are doing well. Agencies typically work on projects for other companies. Now, when that slows down, when the flow of projects slows down because companies are not doing new initiatives, agencies will typically hold back because they rely on that client flow. Bigger companies, typically it's a more systematic thing, which is they wouldn't freeze hiring unless they were sure about it, because it's usually a much bigger organization. So a lot of them have actually resumed. A lot of them, bigger companies who were startups at one point, are actually thriving a lot. This is the reason. I'm seeing some comments. A lot of you guys have gotten this. Rajat, you say remote working, correct. Small core team, people are in the internet more than ever, ThunderX. Startups are providing tech solutions, Utkarsh, correct. Srinidhi, you're talking about productivity. To some extent, that is correct. Kaizen says because things have gotten digital, that is true. Shadow says digital platforms are in demand, correct. Now, overall, what is happening is tech adoption, which is digital adoption, has been accelerated by COVID, which is companies that typically thought, our dhanda is in the real world. We don't need to worry about this internet thing. Suddenly are like, shit, how do we get on this internet thing? Companies that have been doing that already, companies that have been building for the future, they've had signals of this throughout. Now, like Reliance Jio has, for example, increased video watch time across all of India. People are online way more now. It's gotten more affordable to do that. Companies have been building for that kind of future for the past few years. Now they are experiencing the spike. They're experiencing their best months yet, because their entire hypothesis around this has been that how do we build for the future when everybody is going to be online? And now suddenly that's been accelerated. When you look at fields like edtech, right? Normally the conversation was around, should I go for this physical coaching where I sit in a classroom and they're going to teach me, or should I do this online type classes? I'm going to talk a lot more about that in this video, by the way. But that was a discussion. Today, that discussion doesn't exist. A lot of that has been accelerated. Now I'm going to talk about some of these things in future, but let's move to the next point here about freelance and full-time opportunities. People who have been thinking about freelancing, this is your best time yet, which is things are actually better now than they were before. The reason for this, a lot of you are guessing this in the chat as well. The reason for this is that companies that are scared to hire full-time employees because they're a little uncertain will go for freelancers, because freelancers, they can actually scale it on demand. They can bring freelancers on board for contract projects and don't have to continuously support that. So if you're a freelancer right now, if you've been thinking about, should I start? This is the perfect time to start. A lot of smaller companies, they will eventually start hiring. But in the meantime, while they get comfortable with this new landscape that they're in, they're going to be hiring freelancers. Now, let's talk about the idea of a recession, right? Are we heading towards a recession? Are we in a recession already? How do you know this? Now, you are going to see a lot of industries affected. Now, this resembles recessions in the past before, but of course, we've never seen a situation exactly like this. But let me talk about why you shouldn't think about this at all. Because if it is a recession, right? Let's assume it is. Normally, what you would assume is when a recession happens, things go bad for you. But if things go bad for you in a recession, that means without a recession, things should be brilliant, right? If before the recession, you weren't doing too well, right? When things were supposedly good, that means the problem is not the recession. It's about you, right? This is a hard truth to accept, which is people who are good, people who are talented will do well despite what the market conditions are. This market conditions, we kind of think of it as an average where, oh, how's the industry doing? But if you think about it to the level of people who are in this industry, people who are good are going to find opportunities. And if you weren't doing too great before the recession, now is the time. You have some free time. Your only thing that you should focus on with this free time is upskilling, which is the skills that you've been putting off, right? Most of you, including myself, we've been building this backlog of things we want to study, things we want to eventually get into. And usually the excuse is, I don't have enough time. Suddenly you realize time isn't the factor here, which is we have all this time. It's actually about interest. It's about priorities, which is if something has been in your backlog for a long time and you haven't done it, it's because your priorities are not right. Let it go. Find what you are actually interested in. Upskilling is what's important. Now, let me talk about, related to that, the death of 4-year programs, which is, we know this, for example. We know that continuous learning is a good thing. We've heard about this, like, oh, we're lifelong learners. But what does that really mean? What does continuous learning mean? Now, let me talk about a 4-year program. Number one, the reason 4-year programs are 4 years is not because it takes you 4 years to teach it. It's because you know this concept, which is the amount of work you have and the amount of time you have, they sort of relate to each other, which is the amount of work, it'll fill up the time you have available. So 4-year programs, they spread out that teaching and they try to fill in stuff so that they can justify it being a 4-year program. Versus most of you know this, like, we know that college isn't the ideal place. We know that college is not for studying. It's for the other aspects of college, which is meeting people, learning how to be in an environment with your peers where you might find your co-founders, you might find interesting projects to work on. And then most people eventually in their free time in college or after college, you realize that I can actually teach myself. So continuous learning is something that happens throughout. Let me talk about this one example here. So somebody from the Discord group, Varun, he's probably on this chat right now. So he's a freelancer who's working on AR filters for Instagram. Shout out to you, right? You're doing really well. Now, AR filters on Instagram, is that something you will learn in college? Right? I want to see your comments. New things that are happening in the market. Like in this case, let's talk about augmented reality filters on Instagram. Is that something that college will teach you? Number one, college does not know what AR is. They don't know what augmented reality is. By the time augmented reality makes it into textbooks, augmented reality will be over. We'll be on to the next thing. Number two, college doesn't even know what Instagram is. Right? If you read textbooks, they're going to be talking about, oh, MySpace is this new thing that kids are on. Bro, do you know about Facebook? Like, college does not know what's going on because the timeline of college is so skewed. It's not real time. What you're learning is what was prepared for the curriculum years ago, right? I've seen so many funny screenshots from textbooks where they are talking about things like they pretend the internet doesn't exist. They pretend Instagram doesn't exist. And they're talking about, oh yeah, you should look at Internet Explorer. It's a browser that we use. Like, academics versus theory. Actually, this is a typo. It should be academics versus the industry. Academics talk about theory. Now, if you're, let's say, doing a computer science program, they can definitely teach you about the timeless concepts of computer science, which is they can teach you data science, they can teach you algorithms, they can teach you the things that don't change. But that's not all it is. There are things that do change. And this is a big part that college cannot cover because the medium of college is not constructed to be real time. It's meant to be a snapshot of what the past was, right? So some of the things, they don't know mediums. For example, they're not going to say that, oh, let's do iOS apps. They're going to be like, oh, ASP.NET, can we actually make a web app with ASP.NET? The tools, they're going to teach you old tools, right? They don't know what the hell Figma is. They don't know what Protopy is. They're going to be like, oh, actually, there's this thing, you might have heard of it. It's called Adobe Photoshop, right? There's a lot of these things. There's mediums, there's tools, processes, and outcomes. This is something that I actually talked about, I think, in one of the training videos on my private Discord, which is you don't just, like, learning is not just about learning the tools. It's about learning the processes. It's about figuring out what kind of things you can make, the outcomes, optimizing for that. And then it's understanding about what mediums are available out there, right? YouTube is very different from Instagram. iOS is very different from Android. The web is very different from mobile. These are mediums. And the way to figure that out, right, is to actually go and learn from the internet. This is very obvious, but no college program will teach you about iOS, because iOS literally is a evolving ecosystem. It changes every single month, right? If not every year. I'm going to also talk about this concept of how internet is a new university, right? Which is, we all know this. Ever since 2010, maybe, we know that, Harvard, Stanford, they're all teaching on Coursera. Their courses are here. But we still know that university is not about the thing that you teach. It's about meeting new people. It's about forming new ideas in a unique environment. And then it's finding collaborators and co-founders and working on projects together. Now, you can do all of that on the internet, but it's not easy, because so far the internet has been about the content. Let's find the content, right? Let's watch this lecture from Harvard. But beyond that, you can use the internet to find friends, you can find collaborators, you can build a personal brand that attracts the kind of people you want to work with. I'm going to talk about that maybe later in this video, but hopefully you get an idea of university is not just about the content, it's about the whole experience of being in an environment with other like-minded folks. Let me take a small 2-minute break, drink some water, and check out the chats. I am reading chats. I see some college bashing going on. Let's talk about remote work. Now, remote work has suddenly gone from this thing which was fringe to becoming mainstream. How many of you, I want to quickly see in the chat, folks that are working right now, how many of you have worked remotely before? Right? Give me a emoji, or give me some feedback in the chat. How many of you are working remotely for the first time ever? Because for me, I've known friends who've been working remotely for a while, but out of all the people I know, it's a very small percentage, right? These are people who are working for companies in the US, companies outside India typically, but also sometimes within India. But it's gone from fringe to being mainstream, which is remote work is the new default. And that's actually a big change, not just for companies, but for individuals. Because with remote work, you could, for example, go into an office, see what everybody is up to, sit next to the person, do all of this stuff. Like, let me talk about design. You could go walk up to somebody that's be like, bro, इसमें ये like ये box ऐसे नहीं होना चाहिए, इसमें feel नहीं आ रही है, and ये कर देते हैं, वो कर देते हैं, and then you do this, and all of this happens ad hoc. It just happens randomly in the office. Suddenly you're working remotely now. You don't have that input of, you can't look at the person sitting next to you and say that this person is busy right now with their headphones on, or they are, really into their work, or they're chilling. You can go talk to them. You can't just walk up to them and be like, listen, dude, I need you to fix this one thing. Communication has changed, which is companies right now are actually going through a very good learning period, which is processes that were happening offline are now moving online, which is a lot of you're on Slack, you're talking about stuff like this, but you know that a lot of feedback still happens in real time, which is you walk up to somebody and say, bro, isko change kar dete hain, aaj ye hoga. But now structured communication is something that you will have to focus on, which is writing is a big skill when it comes to remote. The analogy that I use for this is, in the real world, you use voice to communicate. But in the online world, when it comes to work, you actually write, which is the way you write is the way you think. And writing is a big skill that most people do not have enough practice with. This is something that you will have to figure out to work remotely, because let me tell you this, companies in the US who are now like, okay, chalo, let's go remote. In a few months, they're going to realize that, okay, we are working remotely. We have these designers. we're paying them $150,000, $200,000 a year. There's a designer who's just as good, who we can pay $30,000 a year, right? That's still a lot. It's like 20 lakhs, right? Or we can pay them $50,000 a year, which is 35 lakhs. The only reason they won't do it is because they're just like, this person here, at least they know how to communicate, which is, we don't want to go through that hassle of hiring somebody from India, but then, maybe they don't understand how our culture is, so they might slow us down. Versus if you can actually build a personal brand where you using your platforms online, which is writing articles on Medium, your YouTube, your Twitter, working in public, you can actually build confidence that this is somebody who can be hired remotely. So in the future, I want you all to think about this. Very likely that your job is going to be remote. For that, you're going to have to change your entire process and way of working and way of communication. A lot more people over the next couple of years are going to be working for non-Indian companies remotely and making a lot more money than they would in just finding whatever job was available in their city. Think about how you can equip yourself for remote work and stand out from everybody else. In relation to that, let me talk about building competitive advantages with the internet, which is, this is the age of personal brands. What that means is, today, the cost of you putting your work out there has fallen to zero. Content creation, the cost is just your time. When you work in public, when you put your work out, you're showing people that you are good at something. You're communicating your proof of work. Now, let me talk about this concept of proof of work, which is the idea that you might be really good, but to show somebody else that you're good, you have to show proof of work. You have to show your portfolio that this is what you've done, or you have to show that over the last few years, you can actually see consistently I've been working on good projects. Now, that is proof of work. People usually wait till they're an expert before they start putting all of this out, right? They're like, I can't share this right now. I'm a beginner. I can't share my work because people will laugh at me, right? But you're missing out a big part of that if that's your mindset, which is you're missing the advantage of proof of work, which is, let's say, even if you're a beginner today, you start putting out your case study, you start writing articles on Medium, you start, now, of course, there's lots of platforms out there, but in general, you start working in public. What happens with this is 3 years later, when you're looking for a job, you now have this paper trail of this person is an active designer. They've been into their craft for such a long time. And that is proof of work. Now, that is something that you can actively build. Personal brand is a playground for improving your communication skills. We talked about how remote work, the structured and unstructured communication. A personal brand, think of it as you have the opportunity to tell your own story, which is, if you, for example, don't have any online presence, what do people know about you? They can go to your LinkedIn and say, this person went to this college. They can see some of your work. They can say, okay, this person graduated this year. But they don't know anything because you haven't put in the effort of telling your own story to the world. So people are going to fill in the gaps with whatever they assume. And suddenly you don't stand out from all of the other designers out there. Now, whether this is for freelance projects or full-time projects, a personal brand is about putting your work out there, and you can use it as a playground for improving your communication skills. I'm going to talk a little bit more about message and the medium. Now, guys, I know I'm going a little bit fast through this, but I want to get to the Q&A. A lot of this might be dense. You might not immediately grasp it, but you can actually check this out later. You can, I'll be sharing a few more resources around this in the private Discord. The comments have sort of slowed down. What's up, guys? Let me take a short break. The message and the medium. Now, this is literally a concept I can make an entire video about, but I'm just going to leave you with this. In storytelling, you have your message and then you have your medium, which is, let's say your medium here refers to Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, where you're putting your stuff out. The message refers to the stuff you're actually putting out. Now, based on the mediums that you choose, you will have to craft your message accordingly, which is the kind of stuff people upload on Instagram is very different from the kind of stuff people upload on Twitter. Twitter is more of a text-based medium. Instagram is a more visual medium. Dribble is a more one-off shots, kind of a quick medium of small visuals. Behance is a more of an in-depth medium where you actually have to go in depth in your case studies. Medium is visual plus text, but it's also in depth. So wherever you decide to be active, I missed a few. I missed LinkedIn. I missed your own personal website, your own email list. There's a lot of these, but think about what your message is and how do you adapt it to the medium. Now, let me talk a little bit about the community, right? So this is something that went on beta. You've seen the links on each of these slides, 10kdesigners.com community. You will also see this link in the description. It's the first link there. What we are doing is we're creating a community where you can actually talk to designers, where you can meet other designers who are doing interesting work, get feedback, and have a network where you can learn from each other. Now, this is a beta. We have something like 70 or 80 people in this Discord right now. We are opening this up to about 30 more people, or maybe somewhere between 30 to 60 people. The reason we're not opening this up to everybody yet is firstly, it's in beta. And secondly, we want to maintain that sort of quality of discussion. So if you guys are interested in this, the beta is now open. I want you to check out the link. That's 10kdesigners.com/community. It's also in the description of this video. A lot of training videos. Now you can of course find out on their webpage what you will get. But let me just end with this note which is it's not just about content. You can definitely find right now on YouTube anything you want to learn. But it's about motivation, which is there is an unlimited amount of content out there. And we all know this, which is we have this backlog of things we want to do, but have not gotten around to. I think we just dropped the call. Let me just continue. So if you folks are interested, you can check that out. And we are now going to get into the Q&A part of this video. So let me just quickly take a 2-minute break while I go through the comments and we can just get started. All right, let's open it up to Q&A. Folks who are on Discord, you guys can feel free to unmute your mics now. Let's start taking some questions about this. Who wants to go first? Anybody wants to open this up?
I have a question.
Yeah, man. You want to just switch on your camera as well?
Sure. Okay. My question is primarily related to remote work. It is to how you can be not exactly productive, but when it comes to being a designer, being creative is, a huge part of the process. And there are days where you are really a lot more creative than the ones on other days. So how do you tackle this, especially in a remote scenario where it kind of gets pretty monotonous?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if I understand your question right, let me rephrase this. Is remote work can get boring because it's just the work. Like you miss out that entire fun part of being with your team and being in an office, and you can
Yeah.
actually lose motivation because of that, right? So I think one thing that I have seen is a lot more companies are figuring out how do you engage um, employees better, which is they are doing a lot of events and stuff. So most likely your company is actually going through that phase where they will talk about, they will be doing a lot more non-work related things to actually keep that company culture up. Besides that, I would say right now is a good time to actually focus on building your sort of network online, which is everybody at this moment is in their house, which is they are um, either working or their classes are also on Zoom now. So this is the best time to get to know and form relationships with people. So this is one of the reasons why the Discord was also started. But I would say try to be more thoughtful about how you can build your network online, which is it's not networking in like a scammy kind of sense, but it's more of how do I make friends with more people? How do I find people who are also doing interesting things? And right now is a time when they're free, which is it's Friday right now. We have more than 100 people on live, but this would not be possible otherwise because most people might go out on Fridays. So I'll say everybody is going through a similar thing and think about how you can make that happen. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Who wants to go next?
Hey Abhinav, can I come up? This is Rajat.
Yeah, man. You just switch on your video as well.
Yeah, sure. Give me a second. Yeah. Hi Abhinav.
Hey, man.
Thank you for those all information you just gave me. Like I have a couple of questions.
Hmm.
Like one is regarding the personal brand. Let's say if we are delivering any task assigned by our project manager,
Yeah.
the whole set of mindset we need for the same is different than we are writing case study for the same. Like somehow it's going to take more time if we are thinking in terms of writing case study later on. So how can we tackle with the same situation? How can we keep documenting our thought process in a same way so that we can write case study at the end,
Yeah.
keeping the deadline tight so that we can deliver it to the project manager as well?
Hmm.
Yeah. Next question
Got it.
can
So
yeah,
let me just talk about this one first.
yeah, sure.
The idea is just that with remote work, you need to put in more of an effort to communicate, which is now is actually the perfect moment to work on your structured communication skills, which is you will have to focus on how do you communicate your decisions, which is writing documentations for the things you've done, using something like Loom as well to just record a quick video of something to get that point across. Because if you think about communication, um, let's say real life in front of somebody is 100%. When you're on Slack, it's a fraction of that because suddenly this multi-input medium of talking to somebody, seeing their facial expressions becomes just sentences, you know. So what you have to do is try to figure out a way to make that high channel communication. That can be Loom, it can be catch-up videos, it can be things like that. But think about how you can make your communication more structured overall, which is you might communicate a lot during the start of a project while getting feedback, handoff. Identify what these areas of communication are and make sure you're very intentional about making more of an effort to talk. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Thanks Abhinav, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
You have another question or
Yeah, almost it is covered by the same.
cool,
Like it
cool,
was regarding communication. Yeah, thank you.
cool.
Hey man.
Hey man, what's up?
One major thing that I'm still struggling with is managing time, right? Like, number one thing, you are at home right now. You deal with your family. You can't say no to them, which will eventually lead to fights or something. With that, I have my work, and along with that, I'm also like working with another company. So these are a lot of things that come into place that do not actually when you are at an office. At an office, your family won't bother you, or your friends won't really call you, or something like that. So how to deal with something like that? If that's a valid question here.
For sure, for sure. I think this is definitely a big challenge because, like, I've been talking to a lot of people who also talk about, you know, like people who are living alone, you're in Bangalore or wherever, they're fine. Then there's some people who, are in a joint family where you suddenly have everybody working from home, but the boundaries don't exist anymore of like work and home boundaries. So some practical tips around that you can maybe try are that firstly, it's good to communicate to the rest of your family members what is your in time, which is in this time, I need to actually focus, right? So usually now, of course, that won't be 9 to 5. Like you can't just be like 9 to 5, don't come into my room, right? But
Yeah.
you just have to figure out some way of making that clear that this is your blocked time. Another example of this is a lot of bigger companies, right? They have this culture of blocking calendars, which is if you actually want to meet somebody, you can't walk up to them. You have to actually book a spot in their calendar. Only then you can go talk to them. Uh, so that is sort of what it's like here. I'm not saying tell your mom to send a calendar invite to you, but do tell them, do try to figure out what is your time versus what is open time. Other than that, for productivity, I would say what you should do is probably be mindful of the time you're putting in, which is try to get something like rescue time on your computer that actually shows you how much time you're spending on focused work versus chilling work versus other stuff. Because now what's happened is, like, I was seeing my own stats the other day. I'm spending like 12 hours, 15 hours online some days. And a lot of times it's just like with work and play, it was like before at least the distinctions were clear, but now that doesn't exist. So I'll say this is a good time to start tracking your productivity a little bit more closely by doing some stuff like that. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks.
Cool, man. Yeah. Thanks for asking that question. Anybody else want to go next? Hey, man, Paritosh, what's up?
Yeah, so you talked about building a brand, right? And so what I feel is distribution across multiple platforms is very important for building a brand. So
Yeah.
for a beginner who doesn't have a lot of experience, doesn't know much about the tools or even technical stuff, and can't really give out a lot of value, like should they really focus on distribution? Like what should be their main motive
Yeah.
while starting building a brand?
Got it. That's a really good question, by the way. I would say think about it in this way. Overall, what you have to do more of is documentation, which is, let's say you're starting a project, you will be documenting what your process was, what are the things you considered throughout. You might write a few paragraphs about approaches you're taking versus not taking. And a lot of this documentation builds up over time. So what I actually suggest people do is have one place where you keep all of this stuff, right? Like I use Notion now, and a lot of people do that, but they have different Notion documents with different things that are going on in their work. Now, once you start documenting and once you build that habit, it just becomes a matter of what becomes public and what stays private, right? So for example, let's say while working on a project, you might have done something around onboarding, which you thought is this was actually very interesting and got me to think about a new concept. You can either keep this for your own reference in your Notion for the future, which is also great, or you can say, okay, let me start talking about this because I know that this is something that other people face as well. So then what you're doing is, instead of actively being like, I have to create a Instagram post, I have to create IGTV, you're saying I have this huge base of content that I'm anyway making. What are some things I can start making public? Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, man. Definitely. Hey man, Rohan, what's up?
I'm fine. How are you, Abhinav? So, few of my questions that I had in the beginning were pretty much cleared with what you've spoken already. One of the biggest question I had right now is, let's say, company like Facebook and Google, they're famous for their work culture, the ethic they follow, the collaborative sort of work. But
Yeah.
then COVID-19 has become a barrier for it. How do you think the new startups that are coming up very soon, just to make the people or their employees productive enough, how can they overcome this?
Hmm. So I think a lot of these bigger companies already had this culture of working from home every once in a while.
Mm,
So that way they've been able to deal with it better. But people are still feeling that squeeze because let's talk about Google, right? You have this crazy campus, you have this
exactly.
5-star food being served to you, you have dinner, you have lunch, you can go out to your office cafe, take one of the Google cycles, and that's a whole fun environment. Suddenly with working at home, it's like we need you to work and that's about it.
Exactly.
So I think that is a challenge most companies are facing, which is besides work. Like remote work is one thing, but what is remote play? It's easy to do in an office environment where you have gaming nights and you have things like that.
Yeah.
But they haven't really figured it out for um, online. So like let's say Facebook and Twitter, they have announced. I think Twitter has said that we're going to permanently be work from home now, and we will open
Okay.
our offices later, but it's a permanent change.
Got it.
And I think Facebook, I might be mixing it up, but Facebook has said at least till September we're going to be closed, or maybe it
Mm,
was Google. So now that they've accepted it's a reality, they are going to figure that out. But I think for startups, it's just a matter of. So I would say the biggest thing is communication, which
yeah.
is now the gaps are being exposed, which is they are figuring out that before we weren't doing this one process, and they have this thing that they're now figuring out the gaps. Like before, this used to not be an issue. Why is it an issue now? And they're like, oh, it's because we're not writing documents or we're not writing
Yeah.
this. So this is actually a big learning time for individuals as well as companies, and that's how they'll, I think, overcome it. Yeah.
So, one more question. The
Hmm.
point of coming with personal branding and how to get yourself out to the community so that people know what you're working and how you're working. The biggest the biggest barrier that I've been facing, or like most of us have been facing with personal branding, is to get those people to follow you
Hmm.
and like to get your work out there so people like you, and you wanna, like, it's basically that image that you wanna show them to people, but you should have the same sort of a crowd too. What would
Hmm.
you suggest somebody who is just new to Instagram, who has just recently opened their Instagram account and want to show their work out to people?
Yeah.
How would you like suggest them to get better followers or more followers?
Hmm. So I think definitely one of the biggest things with these platforms is you do want to get likes, you do want to get
Exactly.
followers, right? Because at some level that is validation that people are liking the stuff that you're putting out. But what you also need to keep in mind is this is something that will happen over time, which is you can think of your own behavior when you come across somebody's profile on Instagram or even on Twitter.
Yep.
There's a split-second decision that you make when you see their photo, bio, and last 3 posts,
uh,
which is, do I want to follow this guy?
Fair enough.
Right? And you're going to scroll and you're going to be like, "Arey, this guy posts this kind of stuff." Or
Mhm.
like, I've seen this with Twitter a lot, especially in India. You go to their Twitter profile and it's just like complaints. It's just like Paytm, yo, this thing is not working. Yeah, I still haven't received my refund. And the only tweets they have is complaining to other people.
Yeah.
And so obviously I would not follow somebody like that. But
Fair enough.
over time, if you are genuinely sharing what your work is, and you can keep these kind of things in mind, which is you can craft your bio and everything
Hmm.
to talk about not just who I am, but what will you get if you follow me. Right? That is something that is very basic that you can experiment and play around with.
Yeah.
But I would say when starting off, try not to focus on the followers, but try to focus on the habit, which is most people
Yeah.
start, but they'll leave by week 3.
Hmm.
Versus if you can somehow build a habit of posting,
Yeah.
then the followers won't matter to you. But then if you keep that habit, then the followers will start coming.
Fair enough.
So it's a matter of balancing that thing of, I need the validation, of course, but it will slowly come over time. So with your inputs, you have to be sort of like, you have to keep posting stuff, but with the output, which is the final outcome, you have to be more patient.
Right.
Rohan, I actually have little a feedback that I can share. This is pretty much because I've been doing this for a
Can you
very
switch on
long.
your video?
Yes.
What?
Can you switch on your video?
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah, man.
Cool. So since I've been doing this for a long time, I started with YouTube, and then it went on Twitter, and now it's Instagram, and then it's Medium. What I've realized is that it will be very demotivating if you have high expectations. So do not have high expectations. What's going to happen is if your work is good and you are consistently doing it, someday something is going to blow up. Some Medium article is going to blow up. Some Instagram post is going to blow up. Some YouTube video is going to blow up. And that's when the followers will start coming in. And when that happens, you will get so much adrenaline rush. You will feel like putting out content all the time. So you have to wait for that moment where you realize where something is going to blow up and suddenly it's going to change the way. And this has happened to me on Instagram. Like suddenly people started liking my posts and then it just blew up because I got like 10,000 followers in a month, and that's because I was consistently doing it. It did not blow up the first day. It blew up after I put like 8 to 10 carousel posts, and then suddenly it just like blew up. Same thing with YouTube, same thing with Twitter. So yeah, that's a very important tip that I would suggest.
All right. Anybody else? Anybody else want to jump in? Questions? Okay. In the meantime, let me just see if there's any questions we can take from YouTube. If you guys think of something, feel free to jump in. Let's see. One question here by Balaji, which is, how is the Discord separate from the Telegram group? Now, let me actually show you directly. Let me share my screen. Folks, so this is 10kdesigners.com /community. You can check this out. Some of the channels that we have, we've got channels for dedicated feedback, for discussing stuff around, for beginners, how do you learn stuff? We have channels dedicated to things like analytics, how do you measure with data? We have a lot of opportunities that are posted in this group. We have a lot of inspiration from everywhere on the internet that we post here. And the main purpose of this group is to have quality discussions, which is with something like Telegram. There are a lot of WhatsApp groups out there. It's hard to keep track of conversation, and it's a single line of communication where you normally just it's hard to keep track of conversations and you just have messages flowing in. The purpose of Discord is to actually recreate the environment of being in, let's say, a design school, or of being in college, or of being in a startup with a design team, which is, these are your peers. These are people you can learn from and ask questions. You can learn from their experiences. So this is going to be that playground where you will actually be able to ask your questions in a structured way. There's a lot of training videos as well, which is every single week I make videos that I don't post on YouTube or anywhere else. It's only for Discord, which is things around design, which is not just the concepts of how do you get started, but things like, how do I maintain my productivity? How do I build my communication skills? How do businesses think about design? How do I communicate with clients when I'm freelancing to get my point across? A lot of concepts around product management, business analytics, communication, productivity, things that will make you a more well-rounded designer, more than somebody who can just do screens on Figma. Because we realize that design is way more than just the tools. So if you are interested in this, do hit the request invite button, drop your email here. Now, I can't guarantee that I'll let everybody in right now, but if your name is on the list, I'll be sending out an email where I tell you when the next group of slots is opening up. So drop your email here if you're interested, and hopefully I'll see you on the Discord soon. Let's get back to some more questions.
Hey, Anirudh.
Hey, Sai, yeah.
Hi, what's up?
Yeah,
so I had a question that's basically revolves around the remote working. And my question is how to collaborate when everyone is at their own, at their home, and it's kind of becomes difficult to, get everyone on a single page, kind of brainstorm, bounce of ideas. It could be with anyone, it could be with PMs, it could be with the fellow designers, it could be with engineering teams. So how to do that and kind of get out of that process productively.
I think roughly I've touched upon this in this video, but the main thing you'll have to figure out is how to proactively communicate.
Right.
Which is you have to actually make more effort now in communicating the things you're doing. Now, what that might mean for every person is going to be very different. But one example I can give is let's say what you're working on right now. In an office, you can just look at somebody's screen and be like, that is what they're working on.
Yeah.
But otherwise, with remote, you have no clue. Now, one type of communication that I might employ in this case will be that I keep people updated with my progress over time, which is sharing, let's say, snippets of stuff that you designed or things that you were thinking about while designing. And just short snippets of your work so that when people think about, okay, what is Sai up to? They're like, okay, last I heard from her, which was in the morning, she was working on this one feature. So that is one thing you can do around, daily sort of communication of what you're working on, which is share your work a little bit more. Besides that, for longer time frame stuff, so things like features that you're working on, things that will need meetings and discussions. Now, meetings, the problem with meetings is everybody gets here. 1 hour meeting with 7 people is actually a 7-hour meeting. So you're spending 7 hours, 1 hour of each person's time. Yeah. So this is where sharing stuff beforehand can be useful. So if before the meeting, you can actually share, let's say, even if it's just a keynote document, which talks about these are some things that this is the current status of this feature. Or let's say it could be a private Medium article or Notion document about these are some things that I've done. These are some things we need to discuss. These are some things that are blockers for me. So things like that can be useful.
Right. Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, welcome. So folks, this live is going to go on for just 10 more minutes. So final few questions. How do you start freelancing? That's one question here by Diksha. Now, Diksha, this is a very big, broad question that I can actually make a series of videos about. Just remember to post this in the Discord. I'll try to make a few training videos about this. But in general, I think a few more people have this question about freelance is booming, but how do you get clients? How do you get projects? So what you can think about is the general framework that I follow for freelance projects. This is something that's mentioned in Pyjama Profit as well. If you want a quick read about what the freelancing scene is like. In general, think about it this way. So you have your work, which is either out there on different platforms, or a lot of times it's private, which is some of it is under NDA, some of it you can't share, but you have some body of work, right? And that body of work shows that this is how good I am, and I can actually do your project because of this kind of experience that I have. Now, the things you need to think about are, how do I get leads? right? And that's number one, which is you can't just rely on putting your stuff on Behance and hoping somebody DMs you, right? That is inbound, but that will only happen if your work is like really killer. But why wait for 3 years till you get popular on a platform when you can get projects right now? So for that, you need to build up a pipeline of leads. And usually the way that you do that is by outbound, which is sending cold emails, which is a huge topic that can be an entire video of itself. About sending DMs, finding people in your network who might be looking for freelancers, finding out some way of building leads. Now, once you have leads, then there's this thing of converting leads, which is out of these total leads, you build relationships with them. Over time, some will convert, some might immediately convert. Realistically, as a single freelancer, you can probably work on one big project a month, maybe a few small projects in between. But you don't have to actually work on converting too many of these. You need to convert a small amount of this. This body of work that I talked about, you still have to communicate to clients that you can actually do it. That's your proof of work. So typically that is about how do you show your work, which is having good case studies, portfolios, a portfolio that communicates these case studies, and sending out good cold DMs to communicate your value as a freelancer. So that is something that, of course, you can't just learn from a course. It's something that you will learn with experience by figuring out these kind of messages work with clients. Most clients don't respond to this kind of stuff. But you start converting these leads. And once a project is done, some of these become referrals, which feed back into your leads, which they refer you to other people and you get more leads. So overall, this is the freelance ecosystem that you will have. This is an ecosystem that you will nurture, which is you will try to put more stuff out there so you get more leads. Inbound, you'll try to do activities which are outbound, like actively finding clients and cold emailing or cold DMing them. And over time, this loop is what will make you a better freelancer. So folks, 2 more minutes. We're towards the end of the stream. For folks that are on the group chat, I want to see a lot of you on Discord. The next batch of invites is going out this weekend. So hit that up. Let me actually see. Let me actually see how many of you have signed up. The link is 10kdesigners.com/community. I know you're seeing this in the description, so go check that out. Oh, we actually have a good number of people who signed up. So I think we might just, this is enough people to close the next batch of invites. So I'm going to see a lot of you in Discord. For people who are not on it yet, who are still thinking about it, check out the page. I would say at least drop in your email so that when it opens up, I'll be able to send you invites. I will also be sending some stuff that we're working on. These are some interviews with designers as part of whiteboard.fm. These are some of the training videos that we're going to publicly make available just to get you an idea of what it's like. I'm going to be sharing this to the people who signed up on email. So I'm going to be sending out that sort of newsletter every week. So if you want to get updates, you want to check that out, 10kdesigners.com/community is the place to be. This has been a great video. This, I think, has been one of our biggest live sessions. We have more than 100 people on this. I will see you all in the next video, which is going to be next week. It will be on this channel, the details of which you can find out soon. Till then, have a good time, get used to remote working, work on your skills, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.